Sea levels increased by a staggering 390 feet until they settled at today's levels. How fast did this happen? The answer may help predict how quickly sea levels could rise in the next century, and how much time we have to defend our coasts. Professor Rick Mortlock is one of the world's leading experts on past sea level rise. He and his team collect fossilized coral from the seabed. In the lab, they analyze and compare the exact depth and age of each sample. A clear picture emerges of how fast sea levels rose thousands of years ago.
We have two pieces of fossil coral that was recovered from drill cores off of Barbados. So by dating these samples and knowing the depth at which they were retrieved, we can use that information to create a point-by-point reconstruction of sea level for the last 20,000 years. There's one particular sea level rise of interest. We call it Meltwater Pulse 1A. During that period of time, we believe sea level rose about 20 meters in 500 years, or about 4 to 5 meters per 100 years.
If the same happens again, it would translate to as much as 16 feet of additional sea level rise in the next century. Factor in today's affairs, and the rise may be even faster.
If we don't get emissions under control, the rate of sea level rise will keep accelerating. And so in the next century, it's not only that we get the additional 5 to 7 feet that we got the last century, that's going to happen, but we add on to that. So now we're looking by 2200, probably at least 15 feet above, and probably 20. By 2100, the cities will know that they are doomed. The coastal cities, anyway.
If the oceans rose with accelerating speed, the planet's most exposed cities may not have time to build adequate sea defenses. Sea levels would rise by 16 feet per century. New Orleans could flood, followed by Miami.
Miami's the worst off, and New Orleans, those are two cities that will have to be abandoned, I imagine.
As southern Florida is lost to the sea, other coastal regions will also struggle to hold back the tides. Among them is the San Francisco Bay Area, with its 7.5 million people.
The San Francisco Bay Area is particularly vulnerable to sea level rise because of our history. Although the bay is big, it's very shallow. 2/3 of it was less than 12 feet deep. So lots of it was filled and reclaimed. We're standing here on reclaimed land, and all of downtown San Francisco, the financial district, is on reclaimed land. We've already seen 7 inches of sea level rise in the bay over the past century. We know this because the longest continuously operating tide gauge in America is at the Golden Gate. So we have 154 years of data. We're just now beginning to realize with accelerated sea level rise, we're going to have to prepare and have a new plan for how we deal with it in the Bay Area.
If sea levels rose by an additional 16 feet per century, hundreds of thousands of people would lose their homes in the Bay Area. To protect San Francisco Bay, levees would have to be built on a massive scale.
The silver lining is the engineering will create so many jobs. Holding off the sea will be the major employer of the world by 2100, I think. This is going to be worldwide. We're going to have a dam revolution.
The bay's entire coastline would have to be defended with levees in order to protect it. But in the east, the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta would remain vulnerable because it's at or below sea level. The Delta has some of America's most fertile farmland.
The most important part is food. It's unbelievable the proportion of human food that comes from land that is at sea level, not necessarily right next to the sea, but at an elevation that will be impacted by sea level rising. Sea level rises a little, all those fields next to it, even if they're not covered by the sea, are rendered useless for human crops by the sea.
If the Delta and its farmland were lost to the sea, California's food supply would be in jeopardy. The Delta is also one of the main sources of fresh water on the American West Coast.
This is the hub of California's water supply. 26 million people drink water that comes from this estuary. That's a huge number. 2/3 of the population of California gets water from this estuary. If you raise sea level even a foot, you know, which in our mind isn't all, as geologists, that doesn't seem like much, yeah, but that's common, yeah. If you raise sea level a foot, the work that we've done suggests that you will salt up this end of the Delta, even if the levees all stay together, even if they don't fail.
If sea levels rise by 6 feet this century, local rivers will be contaminated with salt, and California's main fresh water supply will be lost. In the next century, after an additional 16 feet, the entire Delta will be claimed by the sea. But there may be a way to defend both the Delta and San Francisco Bay.
San Francisco is among the best, easiest to save. The most radical solution would be putting a big dam right across the bay under the Golden Gate Bridge.
On the ocean side, the sea is about 130 feet deep. Building a dam would be controversial and would turn the bay into a freshwater lagoon. But at a time of intense sea level rise, some may consider this the best option. Using cutting-edge technology, huge dredgers could pick up sand from the seabed nearby and deposit it as the dam's foundation. The dam's shallow incline would ensure maximum stability against earthquakes, breaking the power of the ocean waves with ease. Vast pipes and pumps would be installed to keep the bay's river water flowing out to sea. The Golden Gate Dam would cost $2.5 billion and could be heightened to deal with any sea level rise in the future. San Francisco and the Bay Area would be saved. One region that may benefit from the U.S.'s sea defenses is the Mediterranean. It's flanked by countries both rich and poor that have thousands of years of history. The Mediterranean has a unique feature, a narrowing at its mouth. The Straits of Gibraltar are between 10 and 20 miles wide, stretching from southern Spain to Africa.